Hello there, everybody, and I hope everybody's having a good day on this end of March or beginning of April, depending on when you're listening to this or watching, as the case may be. Um, I want to continue discussing a bit about memory and learning, as what I've been going through so far. And again, I want to remember or remind you, I guess, that I am following more or less the book, How We Learn, and I'll give you a reference to that in there. We gotten a few pages, but at this rate, it'll take me a while. But at least it gives you some concept. If you do want to go back and take a look at the book and see where I'm going, what I've said to review it, you can. Now, I want to talk first about trying to remember something if you know you're going to have to take a test or do something once. If it's like, say, I don't know, a driver's test, or you have to go up and give some kind of a test or presentation or something, and all you need is the information and you have to do it once, and then you know you'll never need it again as long as you live, but make sure that that's the case. I mean, you may say, I'll never do this again. I'm going to go in there, I'm going to take it, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to be done. But what happens if the power goes out, there's a storm, somebody does something and you has to be rescheduled? The odds are is then you'll have to go back and learn this stuff all over again. So with that caveat, well, the first thing I want to talk about is when you're going to have to learn something for a relatively short time, and then you can brain dump it and you don't care if you ever read it or hear it or know anything about it again as long as you live. Now, the first thing, if at all possible, take a look at the place where you're going to have to either make the presentation or take the test. If it's going to be, say, like a driver's ed test or some kind of a test, like, I don't know, some kind of big test that you have to take for some reason, see if you can see the room. Most likely, it's going to be something like a room, a fairly big room, might be small, but fairly big room with tables and chairs, or maybe like student desks. It's going to be a bland room. If you're lucky, you might have a window, probably not. And it'll have a door, obviously one door, because you've got to get into the room, and possibly a clock, maybe not, maybe a couple of clocks, maybe no clocks. A lot depends on the test. This is somewhat important if you can figure this out ahead of time, because if you know that you're only going to be taking it once, what you want to do is you want to study and learn or memorize, however you want to look at this, the material as close to possible in the room in which you're going to take it, because you need the cues that you're going to see from the particular room. Now, I've said this before, and we've mentioned it, and you guys know what it's like too. You're in your bedroom and you remember that you have to go into the kitchen. You walk into the kitchen and you say, I have no clue why I walked in here, but I knew I need to do something. This is the power of cues, because then what you have to do is go back into your bedroom where you saw that cue and you said, oh, that's what I need to do. You couldn't remember it in the kitchen because you didn't have the cue. This is where the power of cues comes in. So the idea is that you know that you're going to go into a room. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, you don't know where the room is going to be, or they won't let you see it. Think in terms that you're probably going to have either student desks that's got the desk kind of thing attached to the chair. You may be at tables, but you're likely to have several chairs, desks or tables, maybe a blackboard or whiteboard or something like that, and possibly a clock. So what you're wanting to do, if, as much as you possibly can, is that when you're studying, put yourself in a situation in which you're looking at those particular things. If push comes to shove and you're stuck, do something like look at your knuckles. So that if you're going, seriously, I mean that, but we'll go into this. So as you're learning something or memorizing and trying to commit it to memory, so you've got it in your head for at least that short period of time, what you're doing is you're focusing on the things that you're likely to see in that room. You could, for example, if you think you're going to have a clock, or if you know you're going to have a clock, if, say, you've got a list of things to remember, attach different points to that list to the points on the clock. So at 1 o'clock on the clock, you remember some point, like say you're learning the alphabet. You go A, B, C, D, or whatever that is around, so that you've got certain things that you're remembering according to those particular cues. So the idea is that if you're trying to remember something like, I don't know, the 10th letter of the alphabet or something like that, that you think in terms of what were you looking at when you looked at the letter 10 on the clock? And the more you look at it, the more likely you are to make that connection. Same way, when you're in your room and you remember something, but you don't remember it in the kitchen. Now, I'm not saying that this is going to be positive. I mean, that positive in the sense that positively that this is going to work out this way, but it increases your chance that when you're looking at those particular cues, that information is going to come back to you. You might need to just say, look at a doorknob and say, okay, there's a doorknob over there. I want to learn whatever. And you're going to connect certain things to that doorknob. I mentioned the knuckles. If push comes to shove and you're basically in a room that's, say, like gray and white and you don't have much of anything else, take a look and say, okay, you're going to remember, say, in a sense, some of you may have learned the months of the year and how many days are in each month by looking at your knuckles. January, February, March, April, that kind of thing. But if push comes to shove, if you've got to learn a list, put different things on a finger or a knuckle or something, with the tip of your shoes, your shoelaces, something that you're likely to have there. Because what you're looking for in this particular case is to hook that particular item with something that you see when you're taking the test. Now, you have to be careful with this because if you've got like 100 questions, there's only so many things you can hook up with those 100 questions. But if you can combine different pieces of information and say you connect one thing with this, with this, with this, these are connected so that if you can come back with, say, the thing that you remember to this finger, you can go back and forth to the other fingers, or the chairs, or the tables, or the cracks on the wall, or the doorknob in the window, or whatever, because you're more likely to hook up that memory. Now, again, once you walk out of that room, and maybe 2 hours after the test is over, and somebody comes back and asks you the same information, likelihood is you're not going to remember any of it. It's possible that if you did something with your hands or your fingers or your shoes, you're going to look down and say, oh, I remember this. And, it's going to be sitting there saying, why do I remember this? And it's going to come out of the clear blue. And you might remember that 3 months from now without any reason why you remembered it. But when you're in the test situation and you're needing to do it just for that one circumstance, that's one way of doing it. Hooking up what you need to remember to the particular cues that are going to be able to pull that memory back when you need to know it. Okay? I know it sounds weird, but it can work that way. If you're needing to learn it, that is, in other words, you're going to have to remember it, you don't want to do it this way. This is one thing I know that people have told us, go into a quiet room where you're not going to get disturbed, do all that sort of stuff. And that's actually not really beneficial to you. That's really good scenario for learning something and then forgetting it the day after you took the test. When you want to learn something, really learn it so that you're going to be able to retrieve it later. You need to do a variety of different circumstances. To some degree, this is why most pretty much everybody American, unless you've had an accident or some such thing like that, you still remember the alphabet song or the other things, because let's take children with the alphabet song. They sang it everywhere. In bed, outside, at the dining room table, in the kitchen, you name it, they got it, because they went and they did it in all sorts of different circumstances. So the more circumstances in which you can study that are going to be different, the more likely you are to pull that information up at any place you need to know it. Now, it may not be a direct pickup. You may have to go through something and say, okay, I got this and I got this, and sort of like come back to it. But you're more likely to be able to pick up that information if you studied it and learned it in different scenarios. So in this particular situation, you could actually go to the beach and study, as long as that was not the only place you studied. Because what you're doing is you're adding different scenarios so that if you had to remember something at the beach, you'd be able to pull it up because you'd done it before. Now, the other part to it is if you're going to take the test in the classroom, you've also got to study somewhere along. Well, you don't have to. It's not also, but it helps. If you go in and you study in a situation like I was discussing before with clocks and tables and chairs and that kind of stuff. Does that make sense? Because what you're looking for is, in the first case, the cues that can trigger the memory. In the second case, the more cues you have, the more likely you are to trigger the memory when you need it. Okay? Does this make sense? Because, again, if you think in terms of what you learned as a little child, many of those things you learn because you did it all over the place. Ask your parents, or if you're a parent and you're watching your children learn and you're sitting there going crazy because they're doing it all over the place and you're getting sick and tired of hearing it again, because they do it everywhere, in the car, every place. So they give it different scenarios. And so they're more likely to pull the information up when they need it later because they've learned it in different scenarios. Okay? So that when you're trying to figure out what you're going to need to learn, figure out whether you're going to need to do it in something that you're going to remember over the course of time, or whether you're just going to need to do it once and dump. And again, remember, just because you dump it once and you may need to know it the next week because, I'm sorry, we have to take the test again because the machine didn't work and you got to go do it again. That means you probably have to go back and start learning it all over again. So just be careful with that. Okay. Um, I hope this covered pretty much of everything, and I hope maybe it explains sometimes why you think you forget things. And it's not so much that you're forgetful as much as you just don't have the cues, that it's not pulling that out of your head. So that if you're, I don't know, looking for something or trying to remember something in a car, it may be simply because that you've never been in the car and tried to remember it. Oh, yes, flashcards. This is why I tell you to shuffle the flashcards, because if you just learn flashcards with, you take one card and then you look at it and you learn to flip it over and you put it on the bottom and you go through it all in sequence over and over again, you will only know that material in sequence. If those flashcards drop and you have to pick them up again, you're going to be surprised at how much you don't remember. So if you really want to learn it, shuffle the flashcards. And this is why I suggest it, because if they come in different sequence, you're more likely to remember it. Okay? Does this make sense? Hopefully this has sort of set off a few bells about why you've been able to learn or not learn things in the past, and hopefully it'll find it useful for what you can do with it now. Or you can help other people do with it now. If it's your children, make sure that they study in different places, not just one specific, shall I say, sterile environment, because that's probably not going to work real well. Okay? I hope this was helpful. If it is, let me know, and we'll continue with the book. If not, let me know that you'd rather I talk about something else, but we'll chat with you next week, okay? Hopefully you've got a good week. We will see you. Bye.